If I was running Activision, I'd probably encourage everyone that works there to set aside like 3-4 hours a week to play games to get the
I encourage
feeling.
my team to play as much as they want. I mean, as long as they're getting work done. Don't use this as an excuse, y'all.
You heard it here first. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Carly Taylor. Carly is a technology strategist, video game enthusiast, and founder of Rebel Data Science. She obtained her MS in chemistry from the University of Colorado, focusing on computational quantum dynamics. She's authored multiple peer-reviewed publications and holds 2 non-provisional machine learning patents. In today's episode, Carly explores the experience of working as a data scientist in the game industry. We also touch on what it means to be a good manager and the dark side of LinkedIn. I had a blast speaking with Carly, and I hope you enjoy our conversation as well. Carly, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. I've seen all your posts on LinkedIn. I've heard quite a lot of it. Quite a lot about your story just through the LinkedIn journey. You've had some awesome experience in gaming, and I'm really excited to have you in today to talk about your journey, what it's like to work in maybe the gaming industry, as well as some of the interesting things that come along with having a presence online on LinkedIn. So again, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. This is going to be super fun.
Yes, and as I was telling you offline, you are the first guest that I've had in this new office. I guess it's not like really that
Yes.
exciting because it's not like we're in person, but it's still new background,
Hey,
and
I'm here
hopefully
for it.
it's
I like the light up
funny.
dino. I love the plants. I think you're slaying it. I'm ready.
Well, it's actually embarrassing how many light up dinosaurs I have. Like I have the nightlight above. I have the I guess like Brontosaurus type thing. I
Yeah.
have a T-Rex one that I haven't put up, and then I
Oh,
have
you
like
got
a
to get the T
children's
Rex in
nightlight.
there.
Yeah, I have a children's nightlight that's a dinosaur, and that one is not well loved by my girlfriend. She's like, "This is a children's toy."
She doesn't want it
Um,
next to the bed.
no, no, no. And I 100% bought it from the children's section in Target. Like absolutely no dodging that
Gleefully, like,
whatsoever.
I love this. There's a kid
Yes, I
that's
was
like,
like,
it's
this
the
is
last one.
sick.
Can I have it? And you're like, no, this is mine.
This is mine. It needs to be in my bedside table where no one will see it except me. Uh, so what I like to do to get people more familiar with you, just to kick things off, is I'd love to learn where you first got interested in data, first got interested in technology. Was it like a pivotal moment, or was this more of a slow progression over time?
I remember the first time I heard the term data scientist, and I was working in a basement laboratory with no windows. I was in grad school, and my friend told me that one of our old lab mates actually got hired as a what they were calling a data scientist slash quantitative analyst at a fintech company. And I was like, what? But he was a physicist. And he was like, I know, but like these finance companies, they want people to come in and do this thing they're calling like data science. It's like all the analytics we're doing already, but they've got all this data. They want people who know how to look at it. And I was like, damn, that's what I do all day is look at a ton of data. I think I could do that. But then I was like, no, but I'm still a chemist. I'm not going to do that. And then here we are.
So, I mean, you started as a chemist, and then how did you make that transition into data science? Because you're obviously, well, you're working as managing data scientist now, and I believe doing some individual contributor work as well. But
Yeah.
what was that process like?
Yeah, I guess I just like yada 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 over all the in between of that. I guess I was thinking about it while I was in grad school. I was already doing, some sort of like computational analytics for my graduate program. And I really started to take it seriously once all my friends were getting these jobs and, the job prospects were so much better than they were for chemists. And it was just an exciting new field instead of like, the future that I was going to have working in a lab making like laundry detergent. It was like, these people doing this like new frontier of work that no one knew what it was. And, the people had started to talk about it's the hottest new date, like job title in 2016 or 2017. Like it was kind of everywhere in the zeitgeist. And so I just kind of started to imagine myself, what would it look like if I started to pursue this? What would I need to do on top of what skills I already have to really be competitive in this field? And it took me about 3 years to like figure that out. I went through the transition from chemistry to data analytics, got my feet wet working in a business, and then moved on to like trying to break into the data science space. And, it sounds easy in retrospect, but in the moment, it was a lot of like day to day figuring things out, trying to make myself more competitive, making mistakes, course correcting, you know?
And so, that process, I would imagine there's a lot of little hurdles that you have to get through moving
Yeah.
largely from academia into a more traditional data science role. What was the biggest or most challenging thing that you had to wrestle with, whether it's conceptually or in action? Like, what was the
Yeah.
biggest cognitive shift you had to make?
So the hardest thing for me, I guess, externally, I'll talk about like the way I viewed myself and the way other people viewed me. In the way that other people viewed me, the hardest thing for me was to sell myself and what my elevator pitch was going to be leaving academia and trying to break into this new field. When I would apply places, I was using the resume that always worked for me as a chemist. And when people read it, they were like, this person's a chemist. I'd get all these people like recruiters making Breaking Bad jokes, like it was so heavily indexed into everything I knew about chemistry that like the story about what I could bring to a data org wasn't there. And I wasn't telling my story well on paper. I wasn't telling it well in person when I was interviewing because I didn't know how to. And then that came with exactly what you just asked about. Like a cognitive shift had to happen where I stopped viewing myself solely through the lens of my chemistry accomplishments and everything that I thought I had done there that was impressive, and like rewriting how I viewed myself through the lens of like what I could do to help a business, what I could do to like help a data org. Why would you want me on your team? I'm not just the chemist. I'm not going to like help you make aspirin, like what am I going to bring to your team? And so that was really hard for me to kind of get into that headspace.
I love that so much. It seems like, um, you know, listening to what you're saying, it seems like you kind of had to identify as a data scientist before you
Yes.
could become a data scientist, before you were sort of identifying as a chemist. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that. They're like,
Yeah.
it's maybe it's some gatekeeping, but it's like, when can you call yourself a data scientist?
Yes.
Right. I
Yes.
think if you're learning data science, you're on your way to becoming a data scientist. You should be
Yes.
thinking of yourself as a data
Yes.
scientist. And that'll probably make it easier. If you
Yeah.
believe you're a data scientist, you'll probably land a data science job
Yeah.
in the whether that actually makes you a data scientist or not. I don't think it really
Yeah.
matters, right? It's
Everyone's
all
going to move
about,
the goalposts for you. You don't have to do it for yourself, right?
yeah.
I see a lot of people and I talk to a lot of people who on their resume will say like aspiring data scientist, or they'll put that on their LinkedIn. And I always say like, cut out that aspiring. Like you're doing it. You're doing projects. Like you're not aspiring, you're living it. Like you need to manifest that for yourself. Because when you put words that basically qualifiers like that introduce doubt into what you are, that like you're not there yet, but you want to be, you discount where you're at, and then other people will discount you too.
Yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. Maybe it's something more philosophical, where it's, if you're putting limiting beliefs onto yourself,
Mm-hmm.
how are other people not going to pick those up as well?
Yeah.
And how are they not going to integrate it? If you're applying to a job and you don't think you're ready, and nobody ever
Yes.
thinks they're ready to apply for a
Oh,
job,
100%.
how is the person that's hiring you going to think you're ready if you don't? And so there's
Yep.
some, I wouldn't say it's arithmetic or magic that you have to do for yourself, but there's things that, prerequisites in terms of personal development and how you view yourself and the story you tell yourself, to be able to get into these positions or to give yourself the best shot possible. I really like that. I don't think I've necessarily thought of the identity piece before,
Yeah.
and that's very powerful.
I spend a lot of time thinking about it because I spend a lot of time combating the voices in my head that tell me that, I'm not what I think I am and I'm an imposter, right? And there's a lot of that self doubt that comes in. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about how you can tackle it or how you try to turn it off. I'm not an expert though. I still have tons of imposter syndrome.
Well, I think that, from my perspective, I've probably talked about this a couple times, but I really like imposter syndrome. Like
Yeah.
imposter syndrome to me is what motivates me to work really hard. It motivates me to go out and learn and pick up new skills. And if I view it, if I didn't have imposter syndrome, that would 100% mean that I wasn't growing. I'd be stuck in the same place. I'd be completely content with where I
Mm-hmm.
am. And I don't ever want to have that. I've always wanted to continue to grow. And if I'm not, I look at it more like a little radar that I'm on the right track. Like if I
Yeah.
feel it, like, oh, I shouldn't be talking at this event. Well, I talked at the Kaggle Days World Championships, where every
That's
single person
amazing.
in the room is probably a better data scientist than I am. Like purely, like
I doubt
uh,
that.
well, like purely from a hard skills
Yeah.
perspective, I think it's probably true. But it's like, okay, I'm here, I'm talking for a reason. There's things that I've experienced, probably from a
Hmm.
leadership and management. I've interviewed a ton of data scientists. Like that's worth something.
Yeah.
Um, but that means I'm at the right place. That means like, oh man, this is what can I tell these people that already know most of, like pretty much everything that
Yeah.
I would know from a hard skills perspective. So I 100%. Um, I completely feel you, and it still hasn't gone away from me, but it's exciting to see that
Yeah.
it can be spun in such a positive fashion.
I love that
Um,
advice. You should be chasing scenarios that make you uncomfortable. So you're pushing yourself outside of, you know, your comfort zone and learning and growing.
well, to that point, I'm interested. You've had some really awesome career growth. I mean, you're again now managing a team. How have you pushed yourself, or what are the things that have uh, that you wanted to have out of your career that you've achieved, and perhaps what are some things that you'd still like to do?
Oh, yeah. This has been such a fun couple of years for me. I really, when I started working in the data science space, I didn't know if I was going to be able to hack it. I had this dream that this was what I wanted to do. I didn't even know if I was going to like the day to day work. You like have this like thing built up in your head that you think it's going to be perfect. And it isn't always like all shiny and new and wonderful. There were hard times, but I was lucky that it ended up being the path for me that really like made sense and I loved the work. And so for the past few years, like I've just devoted myself full time to like becoming, the best data scientist I can be. And then as I grew into leadership positions, trying to be the best and most empathetic leader I could be and really fill in the gap that I was seeing in the data world. I think that there are a lot of extremely talented data scientists. I think that there's a lot of extremely talented people with the hard skills. And I've worked for some really amazing people. And I haven't worked for as many amazing people with the soft skills. And so I've really tried to bridge that gap. And for me, leaning on my soft skills, I think has been something that has helped me advance more quickly in my career. Things like never talking down to my stakeholders, making technical like problems more accessible to other people, growing people around me and mentoring people under me. And a lot of that was things I learned in academia, like you learn how to teach. I was teaching undergrad classes when I was in grad school, and I tried to bring that with me, like that love of helping people learn new things and like lifting people around me up in a way that, they wanted to be seen and heard. And I think that's helped a lot with, growing into leadership is really like trying to embody those principles, but it's not always easy, right? And when you're in such a technical field too, a lot of those soft skills get glossed over because you also need to be able to like handle yourself on a command line. And so, you end up having to balance those two things, which oftentimes aren't easy to kind of find the right mix between them.
I really that concept of empathetic leadership, I couldn't agree more how powerful it is. And just as you described in the technical fields, it's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
But I think you would probably agree. We see constantly how people are promoted in these technical fields, right? The
Mm-hmm.
best individual contributors get more responsibilities
Yes.
and then often go into leadership.
Yeah.
And that isn't necessarily a good thing. The best individual
No.
contributors are almost very frequently not the best leaders of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, like, how do you solve that problem? Is it just that you have to be great at both, like you are? Or is it something else that, like, you know, maybe we have people that are more empathetic and better leaders, but less technical leading these teams. But then there's some like respect
Yeah.
dissonance. Like,
Yeah.
there might not be a solution, but how do you approach that?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know that there is like a perfect solution. I do think that there needs to be perhaps like a shift in the industry, like a new paradigms for how we judge people, right? As much emphasis as we place on the technical aptitude, I think we do need to place an emphasis on soft skills and ability to communicate with stakeholders, more so than we do now, right? It's been such a scramble in the data space to try to find people with the technical skills to keep leveling up as like the industry changes and there's more new challenges, right? And there's more data and it's always like a rush to the top technically. And I think that when you're in a situation like that, it's easy to overlook the soft skills because you literally just need to hire someone who knows how to use this technology, right? And your pool of applicants is small, and you're in this like race with every other tech company, and you kind of don't have time to reflect on those kinds of things. I wonder as the industry levels out and the mad scramble for hiring and doing the newest and greatest things slows down if we can't re-examine where we're at now. Like, do we have the right people in the right positions to really kind of continue the momentum forward and keep people, right? Because retention is a huge part of having an effective team. And if you have an effective leadership, you're not going to have the retention that you want. And then you're going to be falling behind in the technical race, right? And it's kind of this like vicious cycle.
I recently released the course that I wish I had had when I was starting out in the data science domain. It's called The Machine Learning Process from A to Z, and I partnered with 365 Data Science to build this. I also worked with my good friend Jeff Lee, who's one of the most impressive data scientists I know, to get all of the implementation correct. This course is special for a couple reasons. So first, it focuses on the machine learning process. So you go from ideation to data collection to exploratory data analysis, all of the steps to building and implementing a data science project. It's all taken care of for you. We don't focus as much on the algorithms. This is all about getting a project out the door. Next, we've also open sourced all of our code and all of our examples on GitHub and Kaggle. Those are very easily accessible to everyone, including those people who just maybe want to see those and don't want to pay for the full course. In addition to that, we've included all of the resources that we use to build the course, so you're getting multiple different perspectives on every single concept rather than just our singular voice. I view this course as one of the most valuable things that I've put into the world, and I'm excited to hear what you think of it. I've included a discount link in the description for the YouTube video, as well as in the descriptions on all the other podcast platforms. Yeah, I mean, the way you're describing it, it might actually be a necessity for some of these companies to innovate in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if the overall technical skill gap lessens, the idea of essentially a 10x data scientist becomes more and more difficult. And
Yes.
you might have a scenario where a 10x data scientist is equivalent to someone who just has 2x interpersonal skills, empathy skills. And I think that's fascinating. You're looking at like diminishing marginal returns in one area and like escalating returns in another area, which to me, I mean, if I'm entering this field, how much easier is it to pick up interpersonal skills
100%.
than it is to like actually like completely differentiate yourself from a technical skills perspective?
Yeah.
And like there just isn't a roadmap. Like technical skills, there's a clear roadmap on how to do everything. Interpersonal skills, it's a lot more, how do I put this? Like opaque about the process. It's a lot more vague. It's a lot more quote unquote touchy feely, but they can also be quantified, which is
That's an interesting area for content development too. There's no one really out there talking about how you level up yourself in terms of the soft skills. We talk about for interviews, right? Here's how you get a job. Here's how you come across as knowledgeable and how you talk to a hiring manager. But what about after that? Here's how you grow into your ability to communicate, present information, make people feel like their problems are being solved and they're being heard. I love to talk to my friends who work in sales. I say this all the time, but I think for a data scientist, the best friend you can make is someone who works in sales because they know what it means to hear someone's problems when they're not vocalizing them properly. And they would know what it means to offer solutions to people. And when someone maybe is not 100% bought in, they know how to get buy-in, right? And if you can learn that from them, like you're going to be unstoppable.
I went on this massive binge of sales books. And I made this video about why selling is important for data science, and nobody watched it. It was very
Really?
But yeah,
I'll
but
watch it. I
yeah,
love it. I think
but
it's a
it
great idea.
right, it's one of those things where it's so disproportionately valuable to you in
Mm-hmm.
your career. For example, if you can sell yourself, you can get any job. If you can sell your
Yes.
idea, you can essentially get money to
Yeah.
implement any solution, whatever it might be. But for some reason right now it's just less sexy to have
Yep.
those skills or think about those skills, because I don't know if it's how things are taught. I don't know if it's how the culture is around engineering or data science, but there's just something that people are overlooking about how important
Mm-hmm.
like that skill set is in your career progress. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
almost every one of the leaders in big tech companies today, or entrepreneurs or whatever it is. They're never the ones. They're very rarely the ones that are the best engineers. I mean, like,
Oh, hardly ever.
yeah, you look at like Elon Musk, right? Very
Yeah.
controversial right now. Very smart, but he's not the best engineer.
He is
You look at
not
his
an
code; it's
engineer. Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah.
But he could do some of it, and then the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
is the business stuff. Maybe he doesn't have the best interpersonal skills either, but there's something about leadership that he understands, something that is
Mm-hmm.
not technical, that makes him successful
Yes.
in his own way. And I really wish people would wake up to that in a little bit more of a sense, because obviously we're gushing about how important it is for the last 10 minutes.
I totally agree. I mean, who are you going to listen to their earnings call? Like the person who's super dry or their like new product announcement, right? Like people don't tune in to the Apple product announcements to be bored out of their minds or like dribbled on with like engineering, nonsense. I mean, there's some of that technical that gets brought to the table, and I think that's important, but it's presented in a way that's engaging and fun, right? That makes you care about the product, makes you care about what's coming next, right? Like no one's tuning into even your presentation at work if it's going to be you showing slides of your code. You need to make people care and buy in into what you're building.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, that especially in my line of work, that's such a like overlooked part. I mean, most of my work I'm presenting to professional athletes
Mm-hmm.
or teams. They've never seen a line of code in their life, right? And that's no
Yeah.
fault of their own, but like
No,
I
but
have
they're
to.
also not going to be impressed if you're like, here's all my code. Like they don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, oh well, like how do I communicate something to someone who's just had a completely different upbringing to me? How do I make it into
Mm-hmm.
interesting, salient story points that essentially anyone can understand, that doesn't have the freaking like 10 years of training that I have? And
Yeah.
if people are looking at that as a challenge or as like a fun thing, or as like that's part of the game that you're playing in this profession, I think it's exciting. If they're looking at like, oh, I did the analysis, now I have to do this whole other thing just to make
Yeah.
just so that
If
like
that's the
some
chore
yeah.
for you, yeah,
Well,
I
maybe
totally
that goes
agree.
into the identity aspect we were talking about before, where it's like if if you make it part of the profession, a data scientist isn't
Mm-hmm.
just someone who's quantitatively apt. You have to bring in and tell the story as well. If you're looking at it all encompassing, that's who I am. I'm a great storyteller, and I use
Yeah.
data to tell a story. It might make those things a lot easier for you to be able to do and enjoy doing them, rather than looking
Yeah.
at them like a chore.
I agree.
So, getting back to your story, so can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing now? Um, and I'd love to also hear about your relationship with gaming. To me, that's something that's super fascinating. It's a very interesting industry. I've had, I think, four people I know with young kids saying that their kids all want to be video game designers. And these kids are like
That's
4 and 5
amazing.
years, maybe like between 5 and 10 years old. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in your experience with video games, as well as what you're doing now and how that's all integrated.
Yeah, I'll start with kind of how I got into it. So I grew up like a lot of people playing video games. It was a really important part of my childhood. It was the way that I bonded with my friends. I would play with my mom. We had so much fun playing together. It was how I learned to be a good sport when I was losing because I couldn't throw the controller or she wouldn't play with me anymore. And like, a lot of valuable lessons came from that. And as I grew up and became a chemist and then stopped being a chemist and had my whole like identity crisis in my 20s, I started to look and say like, what if I could redefine everything I wanted to be? Where would I want to be? Like if we're already getting aspirational with this data science thing, or like I think I could just do this, and I'm going to tell myself that I can achieve this. Where would I want to be if I was doing data science anywhere? And it was kind of hard for me to imagine like working on video games, but I always thought, I think that that could be a field that I would actually love to work in, but I didn't know how to break in. And I didn't even know, that there were data scientists working in gaming companies. If I'm being totally honest, I thought it was all game designers. Um, and during the pandemic, I, like many people, was playing Call of Duty basically all the time because I couldn't leave my home. And as that was going on, I was just trolling LinkedIn one day and saw a job opening at Activision for a data scientist on Call of Duty. And I was like, wouldn't it be hilarious if I got this job? And I sent it to all my friends. And I was like, how funny would it be if I started working on Call of Duty? And they were like, ha ha, yeah, that'd be great. You could get us game codes. And I applied and I never thought I was going to hear back. It was just one of those things that I was like, I have to apply to this job. I can't not now that it's here, it's in front of me. I'm never going to hear from them, but hopefully I get it. And yeah, they called me and I was just like fangirling so hard. I had to like play it cool on the phone, like act like really casual, like, well, I'm casually looking. I'm not sure if I want to leave my job yet. And it was just like such a lie. I was like, I'll leave right now. Like you can pay me in just like thank you notes. Like you don't have to give me money. Like I'll come.
In-game currency.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had to, I went through the rounds, I got the job, and I just had to pinch myself. I was like, there's no universe where this is happening. Um, and I started working as a data scientist on Call of Duty, and it was hilarious and so much fun and crazy. And I can't even explain what the last 2 years have been. It's been a whirlwind. It's been so fun. Um, yeah, and I was an individual contributor. I started building up this project, working on disruptive behavior and working on, our online networking security stuff. And out of that just came more and more, need for this as the company grows, as online gaming gets more and more popular, um, more and more need for security. And so I was able to grow and get my own team working on this. And it's just been like, it's been crazy, but I wouldn't change it for anything. There's been a lot of weekends worked, but I think it was worth it.
Well, I think it's really cool. I mean, it seems like you sort of created your own flywheel where you were able to find something that you had previous knowledge of. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
a massive consumer of Call of Duty,
Yes.
and why wouldn't they want to hire you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people don't think of it that way. It's like, oh, I do this as a hobby. I know so much about it, but I could never
Uh-huh.
work there. It would never work. And it's like, why not? You are the
Yeah.
exact candidate that should be working there. If you're obsessed with the
Yeah.
product, how are you not going to put your best foot forward at making it better?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I actually got my first internship in data from something very similar. I loved
Okay.
daily fantasy sports. I was playing
Okay.
DraftKings all the time,
That's
and
awesome.
so I was playing professional golf. I was not good enough, so I was like, I'm gonna go back to grad school. And in the interim, I was like, okay, I have 3 months before grad school starts. Let's try and find some work.
Yeah.
Get whatever. And I was like, I really like this DraftKings stuff. Like, let's see what careers they have. And they had an
Uh-huh.
internship on the website. I was like, all right, well, why don't I apply for that?
Uh-huh.
I was applying to grad school, so I was like, do you have a grad internship rather than
Uh-huh.
a regular one? And they made the job for me because they're like, oh, he's obsessed with the product. How could he not come in and
That's
really
so
enjoy this, right?
cool. Yeah. Because
But
you could totally empathize with the users. Like you had all of the perspective that you needed to excel in that.
well, and, talk about the interview process. It's like, well, this person is already coming in with an outside perspective of the problems that we have.
Yeah.
So, and they're an active user of the product.
Yep.
So they're going to be able to determine the second order consequences of any of the changes that we make. I mean, that to me is like crazy. I have a bunch of friends that are
Yeah.
at big tech companies and they don't even use the products that they're working on. I was like, why you work
Yeah.
there? like,
That was me actually like a few years ago interviewing at Facebook, and I was like, I don't even have a Facebook account. I don't like this website.
yeah, well, exactly. Like, that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, you interview with Snapchat and you don't have a Snapchat. It's kind of
Yeah.
hard to.
Yeah, it's
Y-
really hard. I mean, and people do it, like we do have people working at Activision who don't play the games, and I think you can be successful. But there just is something that comes along with being able to empathize with the players and being able to like understand the product from the perspective of the consumer that makes your job so much easier. I don't think it's impossible to do without that, but I do think it makes it like it's just like the leg up that you need, to just be that much more effective.
oh, for sure. I mean, on the other hand, if you don't have that, you just have to work significantly harder to
Exactly. Yeah.
understand. And
Yeah.
I mean, if I was running Activision, I'd probably encourage everyone that works there to set aside like you know at least 3-4 hours a week to play games, right?
Yeah.
Just to get the
I encourage
feeling.
my team to play as much as they want. I mean, as long as they're getting work done. Don't use this as an excuse, y'all.
You heard it here first. Uh,
No, but like all jokes aside, we play together as a team during the week. Like, we'll take Friday mornings and play Warzone together. And, you know, whenever there's something funny that we're trying to test, I'm just like, all right, we'll hop into a game and see. I, we're actually testing something right now that requires actually getting like dying a lot. And my friend was complaining. He was like, "Oh, my KD is not liking this that we're doing." And I was
oh,
like, "Get a test account because we're going into like live games." And it's so funny. I always wonder like who's on the other end that they're just like,
like this
"Oh,
guy
that person was so
sucks.
easy to kill. That was great." And I'm just like, "Thank
If
you."
they only knew.
If they
But
only
one
knew. I'm
of one of
sitting there like,
my favorite memories. I had an intern for a summer, and I was working out of my apartment in Chicago, and he'd come over and we'd work, and then we'd play like Fortnite or something all afternoon after we finished working. And because it's
"That's
Chicago,
funny."
middle of winter, there's nothing to
Yeah,
do.
there's nothing
Uh,
to do. You don't want to freeze outside.
exactly. And I have never played video games in my life, unfortunately. My parents were no video game household. Um, So, but it's like fun, like the community aspect when you're on a team,
Yeah,
especially with people in the same room. I feel like
yeah,
there's like a very different element
yeah.
to it, and the
There's
team
almost
building and the
nothing better
systems.
than like couch co-op games where you're sitting next to each other, and God, that brings back so many memories.
Oh yeah, very much. So I would always go to my friend's house and secretly use them for their video games. I feel kind of bad about that now,
Like,
but
don't tell my parents we did nothing but play video games.
my parents were fine as long as it wasn't at our house. I think that was like a
Okay,
very interesting thing because my dad
okay,
would get 100% addicted to video games.
okay, okay.
Um,
So it was for everyone's best interest to just keep it away.
exactly. That I mean, honestly, that's how I am with a lot of things. Like, I don't keep junk food in the house because I would eat it all the time.
Oh,
All right,
I've
like
like
those types of
I
things.
have this like Oreo popcorn on my desk right now.
That does sound pretty good, actually.
I ate a whole bag though while I was working. So like see, like you're doing it right because I'm sitting here mindlessly. I just ate this entire bag of popcorn. Like what am I doing with my life?
I see. I realized early that I didn't have self control,
Yeah.
so that's the only way I can control myself is I just set the
Yeah. Your
limitations.
self-control is just keeping it completely out of sight, out of mind,
Exactly,
out of
exactly.
grasp.
But the phone is the worst thing for me because it's just like
Oh, I totally agree.
it's always there.
All
I
day. It's really bad. I have
my friend
Slack on my phone too for work. It's a killer. Highly suggest everyone doesn't do that.
I turned off all my notifications. People hate it because they can't ever get in touch with me, but it's the closest thing I can do. My friend
Good
Tina
for
has
you.
a box where she just locks it in there, and it
Really?
has a timer on
That's
it.
actually
Yeah,
brilliant. Good for
yeah,
her.
yeah. It's
That's
a
cool.
really good. Okay, so we
She
digress.
makes YouTube videos, right? Sorry.
Oh yeah, she crushes it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
she's.
great.
I think when we were talking about I'm going to be in Utah for a little bit, I think she's going to come, and maybe one or two other creators are going to come. So
That's awesome.
if you
That's
want to
really
come
cool.
ski, you're
Yeah,
welcome to
hell
join
yeah.
the
Tell her
party.
to bring the phone box. We can all put our phones in there.
Yes, that is amazing. That would be such
What
a
would a creator
productive.
meetup be if we didn't have our phones?
I know.
That
Well,
might actually be kind of cool.
that's the thing with a lot of the data YouTube creators.
Uh-huh.
Most of us make YouTube videos,
Yeah.
and so there isn't this necessarily this compulsion to be always like getting content with the
Oh, that's
phone.
true because the YouTube, like you have to sit down and like you have a whole thing. Yeah, it's not like a short form. But YouTube is getting into shorts now, so you might be tempted.
I know. I'm just gonna be paying people to cut up my other content. I don't.
That's the way to do it.
the the thing I hate about content is the grind, right? I
Yeah.
like of constantly producing something.
Yes. Yeah.
I much prefer like a podcast to me is amazing. We have a good conversation. I get to talk to super
Yeah.
interesting people, and then moving forward, I don't have to worry about like, oh, I have to upload this uh, every single
Yeah.
day, do whatever it's once, and then we,
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
yeah,
It is a lot. Like I'm writing on LinkedIn every single day, and trying to like put good content out there and like drive value for people. And it can be like I'll take weeks off and then people are like, "Where are you? We miss you." And I'm like, "I know, it's just like I can't all the time. And
yeah.
it's so hard to continue to do. So you really have to find some motivation and yeah, that's when I look through the messages of people saying nice things and I'm like, "Okay,
You're
it's worth
so.
it."
Do you know who David Goggins is?
No.
Okay, so David Goggins is like the most hardcore person on the planet. He's like an
Okay.
ex Navy SEAL. He's run these 250-mile ultra marathons essentially
Oh my
on
god.
like
I
no
can't even drive
knees.
250 miles.
But he's like crazy. And what he does is the exact opposite. He will read to himself the like mean things people say about him and all the people that doubt him and just like plays it over in his headphones. He'll
Oh
just like
my god.
listen to it to motivate himself. And
That's crazy, but also awesome. Good for him.
it's great.
Whatever works.
I highly he wrote this book Can't Hurt Me, and he has another one coming out soon. I absolutely love this stuff. Absolutely
That's great.
psychopathic, but very motivating.
I need to read that actually. That might help me.
Yes, I you will 100% like when I read the first book, I was ready to run through a freaking wall for
Really? You're like, I'm so
probably
hyped right
3 straight weeks.
now.
Yeah, I was running every morning. I was going to the ice
Really?
bath every day, and then it
Aaron, I don't
fizzled
think I
out.
can
But
handle
um,
that.
I have not been
There's
running
no
again
ice
since.
baths in my future, Ken.
Hey, it's good for you. I have one at the house. It's like, like
I
in,
believe you, but I don't think I could do it. Like everything in your brain is telling you not to get into this icy cold water.
who was I talking to? I think it's Demetrius who runs the ML
Uh-huh.
Ops Slack.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's out there in Germany going out in 30-degree weather and breaking the ice and jumping in every day.
Oh my God. Listen,
Yeah.
I lived in Germany. I love all of my friends in Deutschland, but I gotta say, they are something else with their cold plunges. The sauna to the cold lake to the sauna. Again, I'm just like, you guys need to chill.
Hey,
Just sit here in the warmth. Let's have a drink.
it's good for
Do
your
we not
health.
have to be jumping into icy water every 10 minutes?
What if that's what they had to do every 10 minutes? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like going
Every
out for a
German just has
smoke.
a
They're like, no,
compulsion.
I have to go jump in the ice.
You're
Oh,
going to
that
get
would be
comments from
great.
people in Germany that are like, yeah, we do. We're actually
Yeah,
taught at a young age every 10 minutes.
that would be so funny. Maybe one day. I aspire to do that. I'd be very healthy if I could do that. Think of the mental fortitude I'd have to be able to do that.
I don't know, man. It's too much.
All right. Oh, so we went a little off track, but I actually I quite enjoyed that. I am interested in um, like what it's like to work in gaming versus another field. To me, that's something. I mean, working in sports, from my experience, is very
Yeah.
different than any other like industries that I've worked in. What are some of the things that makes the gaming industry unique?
My guess is that it's probably a little bit similar to working in sports. I'd say that it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of work, but the fun makes it so you don't feel like the work is that bad. But there's always something going on. Like we talk about constant content in the gaming world, there is a constant release of content, right? Like you want to drive the value for people to keep people coming back to the game so that they're having fun. There's stuff for them to do, there's new events. And like this constant drive for content means there's always stuff that you need to be looking into. There's always something like a new question that a stakeholder has that you need to be trying to get to the bottom of. And it's extremely fun and it's extremely challenging. And if you don't love it, you can burn out really easily, I'd say, because you need to be invested in the product and invested in the success of the game in order to, I think, like continue to show up and to continue to want to be a part of the crazy scramble towards the end goal, which is just to get the next thing out the door.
So I would imagine there's differences in that between multiplayer and like a more traditional like
Yeah,
console game. Um,
I would say so. Yeah.
yeah, how has that been? Oh, I guess you described what it's like on the multiplayer side. That seems so fascinating. You're constantly getting patches. Like you're trying
Yeah,
to constantly update and monitor things. To me, it sounds like you have to be really good at prioritizing in
you
that
do.
domain in
Yes.
particular. Do you have any secrets
100%.
you could cue us into? Because I am not great at it.
Hire a project manager.
Excellent advice.
Big shout out to Dan. He got my life in order. I am not, I'm also like you, Ken. That is not my forte. I'm good at, taking in feedback and kind of trying to prioritize my backlog. But in terms of like formal processes, like getting a Jira board stood up, like all that kind of stuff that you absolutely need to stay organized and to stay on top of things and to triage incoming requests. That is not my forte. So if you are like me and that's not where you excel, hire someone who's really good at it. You'll make a kick ass team.
So I think a lot of people confound like a project manager versus a people manager. So obviously you're
Yes.
a people manager, you have a project manager that helps to run your life. Can you maybe articulate like what's the firm line between those two groups and what are some of the maybe different skills that are really important to have more so as a people manager? Because project manager, you just have to be really freaking organized and you have to be
Yeah,
willing to tell people exactly what they need to do and in a way that
exactly.
they need to hear it.
Yeah. I would say for the people manager side of things, right, there still is this aspect of managing stakeholders, making sure that the projects are not only you have good projects coming in and work that you can work on, but also that you're reaching out to other areas of the business and that you're maintaining your domain expertise and helping people solve their problems too, right? Like, not every project I work on comes to me and is laid tidy on my front door with a CSV of data, like you have to go out and get it. You have to find where the data is coming from. You have to talk to the teams that instrumented it. You have to make sure that like this downstream stakeholders are going to use what you're going to build, right? And so like orchestrating all those different moving pieces, I would say for, the team manager and whoever's managing the roadmap is going to be their biggest like contribution. And then when it comes down to, okay, we have the roadmap, you work with your project manager to make sure you can execute. Does the timing look okay? Do we have the resources in order to like follow through with the promises that we've made? And so that's how those two people work together. And then I'd say on top of that too, you're a people manager, so you have the people reporting to you. You need to make sure that their needs are met, that they feel like they have good career growth, that they're working on projects that are interesting to them, and that they have a future at the company, and that they're happy. Right? Because
Yeah.
if your people aren't happy, you're not a good people manager.
Yeah. And you might have to be finding new people, which is even more painful
Yes.
to
Oh
make
my
people
gosh.
unhappy.
Finding new people. Love your existing people. Finding new people is hard.
So, talking about maybe like a broader organizational thing or broader industry thing. So, data science is a pretty heavily male dominated field. I would imagine gaming, I would imagine sports are also even more heavily male dominated. What is that experience like? Is that something you notice in work or in industry, or again, just like what is that overall experience like from your perspective?
Um, you know, I definitely, it's something that I've noticed. I started my career in a male dominated, STEM field. Actually, I think chemistry is getting better with more women, but, working in STEM, working in labs, I was always surrounded mostly by men. And then starting my career in data, there was a little bit more balance when I was doing data analytics, certainly in data science. And the more I get into leadership positions, the more I realize that there's fewer women who are like making their way up the ranks. And I'd say that that's definitely, it can be disheartening, but I also see it as an opportunity for us to grow. I think that every time I see a woman out here like killing it, we've got Megan Liu, we've got Jess Ramos. We have, these amazing women in data who are making a name for themselves, moving up in their careers. Like I see an opportunity to also help lift each other up, and have each other's backs. I often think about when I was younger, and I think that the way that women treated each other, maybe in the 90s or the early 2000s, everyone was like very like the movie Mean Girls. There's a lot of like antagonizing and bringing other women down. And I think there's been a transformation probably since Me Too, where everyone wants to lift each other up, right? There's a lot more camaraderie and making sure that other people feel a sense of belonging, right? And this isn't just women. There's tons of underrepresented groups in gaming, I would say, and in data. And trying to build those bridges and bring people and give them a seat at the table is something that's important to me. I know it's important to my leadership. And I wouldn't be somewhere where they actually weren't following through with that, because it means a lot to me and it's something I try to do and I try to live by that. If I'm not bringing someone else to the table or helping someone else get their voice and I'm like doing the opposite and silencing people and shutting people out, then I've completely failed at what, I see as my purpose here. And as I get more notoriety, like that's part of my duty of care to other people, I'd say.
That's very powerful. I mean, you said duty of care. Do you feel like in some sense you have a little bit of responsibility to you know present yourself in a certain way to make pave a way for other people? I know, for example, my dad, who's the first Asian president of like the American
That's
Oral
awesome.
Surgery Society or something like that. But he told me explicitly, he's like, look, no one's ever done this in the United States
Yeah,
before. Like, I feel like I have to do this
that's
because
amazing.
of what it could make for other people.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm interested just in how that plays into your career motivation in general. Like,
yeah,
does that maybe push you more towards that leadership because that is such a more um, kind of like visible position?
yeah.
Or I'd love for you to just expand on sort of your ambitions on that front.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't see myself necessarily as like the trailblazer at the front of anything. I see myself as like one person in a long line where there's people ahead of me who have, held their hand out to me. And then it's my responsibility to do the same thing, right? Kind of like the pass it on um, ideology there. And so, yeah, as I move up and get more visibility, even on LinkedIn, in my career at Activision, everywhere that I go, I do feel a sense of responsibility to be, um, you know, reaching out as much as possible, talking about the issues I've faced as much as possible, making sure that other women can see themselves in these roles, because I've seen other women in these roles and that helped me visualize where I could be, right? It's hard to imagine yourself somewhere as the first. And like that's so impressive that your father was able to do that, because he didn't even have an archetype for what that would look like, right? He had to be the one. And so it's a lot easier when you can see yourself somewhere because there's someone else occupying that space who like looks like you or thinks like you or has been through the same things you've been through. And so now that, I kind of accidentally got started on LinkedIn, I never really, intentionally started making content or tried to get more notoriety. But now that I feel like I have an audience, I absolutely feel like I have to speak about these issues. And if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? I think there's other people that will, but, one more voice isn't going to hurt.
That raises an interesting point. Obviously, you have a large presence on LinkedIn, and there are some fairly negative things that can come from that. Um, I've seen some pretty disgusting messages and things like that. They come through, to a lot of my friends. And there's this like massive dichotomy between what people are comfortable sending men over the
Yeah.
internet versus not men over the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, even on LinkedIn, there's some stuff that's like highly inappropriate. How is this even possible when this is connected to like your profession and these types of things?
Your guess is as good as mine. Some of these people, I'm just like, what kind of universe are you living in? On one hand, I almost envy them because you're just running around through life, spouting off some crazy shit with no sense of like there's any consequences or, it's just like it's completely delusional. I have no idea. Um, for some people, I think, being a troll is almost like a full time job for them. And, if you're not going to be, um, infamy is better than being completely forgotten, I think, for some people. And so if they're not getting the attention that they need or think that they deserve in a positive way, it's like act out and try to get people upset. It's better than people thinking that you don't even matter at all, right? It's strange.
I don't know how much of this stuff goes on because people just are ignorant or because they're delusional. But,
Yeah.
talking about these things hopefully makes ignorance go out of the equation,
Yeah.
right? And
I've seen some people too, like admit to, oh, wow, I had no idea that I would come across that, right? Like there are learning experiences for people. And like I've made mistakes. No one's infallible, right? Like I've said things that offended and hurt people that was completely unintentional, right? And like talking about it, like you're saying, it's just an opportunity for people to learn.
to
But if
learn
you
and
get
grow.
told about something that your behavior is problematic or why it might not be the right move, and instead of reflecting, you get combative, I think that's when there's like a really big problem.
Oh, I agree 100%. Or if you apologize just because you don't want to get in trouble.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
big
Like,
one that
I'm
irks
sorry
me
I
quite
got
a bit.
caught.
Yeah, yeah, and you can tell. It's so easy to tell. I mean,
Yes.
basically every YouTube apology ever. Um,
The YouTube apologies.
yeah,
Has there
exactly.
ever been a sincere compilation of?
Oh no, there's this
uh,
more recently. There's this guy called Liver King,
mhm.
and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the lore, but he
No.
basically like claimed that he was natural and is selling all these supplements based on,
Oh, I did
yeah,
see this drama.
and so he
Yeah.
was outed
Come to find
for,
out, he was on roids, right?
yeah, quite a bit, and his apology was like, it was pretty funny. Um,
Yeah.
he's a really good speaker though. Like even in
Is
like the
he?
worst people, I find it fascinating that there's interesting things to learn about terrible people. Like the
Yeah.
guy is
Yeah.
like his diction, the way he's clearly rehearsed what he says, and like
Yeah.
the presentation is like very, it's like highly
Yeah.
impressive. But then you're
Do you
like,
listen to Behind the Bastards podcast?
no, what's that?
They it's just an interesting, they do a good job breaking down people who are like obviously horrible, but like kind of learning about their background and like really getting deep into understanding like what makes some terrible people tick. And it's actually quite interesting. Sometimes it gives you, I mean, not empathy because a lot of these people are like, Stalin, you like terrible people,
Yeah,
but it does give you like a little bit of like I think insight or at least a cursory understanding of like how these things happen.
yeah. I mean, I always think that's like Stalin, terrible, right? But was
Yeah.
able to like rally a large amount of people. Like
Yeah.
there has to be
Crazy.
something interesting that you can learn about how people think or those types of things. Not about
Uh-huh.
anything that he did, but it's like it's this idea that like humanity and like the way we work and the structure of
Uh-huh.
like what worked for him
Yeah.
has like very broad applications to who we
Yes.
are. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I won't be as easily swayed by something by XYZ,
Yeah,
hopefully, if
exactly.
I understand what went wrong in those
I know
scenarios.
what propaganda looks like now, at
Yeah.
least maybe a little bit.
Oh, hopefully. I don't know. It's a little bit hard these days
It is hard. It
with
is hard.
GPT just producing all the new propaganda.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. That thing blows my mind. I'm like, I work on this stuff and I have been messing with it and I'm literally in awe.
oh, I asked it to write me, what was it? For my next video coming out, I was like,
Okay.
what like give me a startup idea using Chat GPT, and it gave me a really like a pretty good one. It's like, well, yeah, why have to
Really?
do entrepreneurship?
That's
Like
crazy.
just ask Chat
Are
GPT
you
to
gonna
give you
have
this.
to give it like an equity stake?
Hopefully not. Um, I,
Chat GPT itself, I mean, not yeah.
not OpenAI.
None of the owners, just like the actual AI. You get 20%.
Yeah, and that's how it started its takeover of the human
Oh my
race.
god. Don't give it money.
Amazing. I think we covered pretty much everything we wanted to touch on. This was such a fun
Awesome.
conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope everyone also got a lot of value out of it. Is there anything you're
Yeah.
working on? Any place that people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more? The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so well, thank you first of all for having me. This was super fun. I don't think I've laughed this hard during a podcast in a while. Um, got kind of off track, but I think we kept it together. I'm proud of us. Yeah, definitely hit me up on LinkedIn. Carly Taylor, got a little slot machine in my name. You'll know me when you see me. You can also find me at rebeldatascience.com. And that's pretty much it. I've got some new irons in the fire for 2023. I'll be announcing some new things, branching out into new social channels, I think. So be on the lookout for that. I'll definitely update everyone when that starts, though.
Amazing. I will share all of Carly's links in the description. Be sure to follow her if you want to see what is in the pipeline. Again, this was
Yay.
amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.